skeletal system. Joints. The bones in our skeletal system are very hard, which gives strength to the body. But if the skeleton was made of a single bone, then it would have been impossible to move. Nature has solved this problem by dividing our skeleton into many bones. And wherever two or more bones meet, a joint is formed. Let us see some important joints in our body. The joints which can move, like those we have in our shoulders or knees, are movable joints called synovial joints. The other type of joints are immovable joints, like that of the skull and chest, which do not move at all. The synovial joints have different shapes, but the speciality of these joints is that they allow the bones to move. The joints determine what positions our body can bend into and to what extent it can be stretched. Synovial joints are of 6 types: hinge, pivot, ball and socket, ellipsoid, saddle and plane. Hinge joint. It is a very simple joint. It allows movement only along one axis. The head of one bone wraps around the cylindrical head of the other, allowing a movement like this. These bones are joined in such a way that they cannot move like this or like this. However, they can move easily like this. It is just like the hinge of a door, which allows it to open or close. The best example of this joint is the elbow. Try to bend your elbow like this. It is only because of the hinge joint that you are able to move it like this. If the elbow joint can move only in this manner, then how do we bend the forearm like this? Let us see the next joint and try to understand. Pivot joint. It also allows rotation along only one axis. The bones attached to it can move only along the vertical or long axis. A pivot joint has a cylinder-like bone which rotates within another bone or muscle. The second bone is wrapped all around this cylinder like a ring. An example of this joint is just below the elbow, which is called radioulnar joint. The lower end of the radioulnar joint is also a pivot joint. Due to the combination of these two joints, we can move our forearm like this. When we turn over the chapati with tongs, this pivot joint allows us to move our arm like this. Now, just try to move your arm like this. You will then understand how the pivot joint works. Ball and socket joint. Ball and socket joint is interesting. It looks just like what the name says. One bone is like a bowl or socket, and the other is like a ball moving inside it. The simple and effective structure of this joint allows the bones to move in all directions, front and back, around its axis, and all around. There are 2 examples of ball and socket joints: shoulders and hips. At the hips, there is a bone with a deep hollow, into which fits the ball-shaped head of the femur. Because of this, the joint gets strength, but the amount of movement is reduced. That is why you cannot move the leg in all directions. Hence, rotational movement of the legs is limited. In the shoulder, the socket is not very deep. Therefore, the bones of the arm are able to move more easily, but the joint is not as strong as the hip joint. Therefore, you can move your arm from the shoulder in all directions, but dislocation of the arm at the shoulder is very common. Ellipsoid joint. Ellipsoid joint is very similar to a ball and socket joint. The difference between the two is that ellipsoid joint is not round but is egg-shaped, oblong. That is why the bones cannot rotate as much as in a ball and socket joint. The bones at the base of the palm form an ellipsoid joint with the radius. The group of these bones and the ellipsoid joint work together when we raise our hands to wave farewell or say bye-bye. Saddle joint. A saddle joint is similar to the ellipsoid joint, but the bones connected in this joint move less as compared to the bones in the ellipsoid joint. The structure of this joint is very interesting. One bone has a convex surface and the other has a concave surface. The convex surface of one bone fits into the concave surface of the other bone like this. The example of a saddle joint is the bone at the base of the thumb. You can move your thumb and can watch how the saddle joint works. Plane joint. A plane joint is a very simple joint. In this, two flat bone surfaces are joined together. They can slide over each other but cannot move in any direction. These are found in the bones of the palm and foot. You have just learned about the 6 different joints in our body. Can you now find each of these joints in your body? Which do you think is the most important joint in the body? Can you tell?